Meridians, so a different energy system to the chakra system, yeah? And from what you've been saying, it's needs a bit more respect paid to it. Is that correct? Would that be the right word to use?
I think that the problem with the Meridian system as a whole is that it's very much more complex than the chakra system. So most new Western alternative therapies tend to go for the chakra system because it's nice and easy to use. You've only got 7 or 8 points. You've got fixed colour pattern. There's no extra levels of knowledge necessarily that you need. So Meridians have more or less been left to the experts who rightly take a long time to study the Meridian system in depth. You can't mess around with the Meridian system, but if you've got 1 or 2 really good assessment techniques, dowsing and muscle testing, and good protocols, then it's a very good system to work precisely with the client.
And it can get to bits that other work on subtle bodies and chakras won't. So it's like it gives you that extra dimension, particularly if you're working on people who are other therapists or are quite experienced in receiving healing, because there tends to be a sort of level where they know everything and their body gets into, so it can easily block healing from somebody else. But when you can offer, or the option on your priority arc is Meridians, is sometimes that's when the real healing happens, because it can kind of, if you like, I always say under the radar, and it can get to places that nothing else gets to very easily.
It's like asking incredibly specific questions. You ask a general question to somebody, they can give you a general answer which is more or less satisfactory. But if you ask a really, really precise question about one thing, then there's a sudden surprise and then they have to answer that question. And that's the same dealing with Meridians. If you target one particular little imbalance that's appropriate to work on, then the body really notices that that is what is being focused on, and it will do that. Maybe it won't have a huge effect on the surface, but it's something that will significantly affect the running of the whole organism.
And the full effect may not be noticed for weeks, but that's fine.
Okay. So the meridians are closer to the physical and to the etheric than, say, the chakras are?
Yeah, the Meridian system, I mean, research work done in Korea by Han and various other people has actually shown that in living person, you can actually, there is like a ribbon, a fibrous ribbon that actually flows where the meridians flow. It can actually be seen during operating procedures. And ironically, but in cadavers, when people are dead, you can't find it. They can be measured as well with electrical devices to see the changes in the electrical field around where the meridian points are. So they're much more embedded into the physical than chakras are into the physical as well, but they have so many other different layers where the meridians are very much part of that physical interface.
So compared to people like acupuncturists who study for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, our techniques are very simple but very effective, but as long as you're approaching it from the point of view of what's appropriate and being very precise in terms of timing, it can be a very effective technique.
First of all, you've got a fairly large area, even in small crystals, so you're not worried too much about exact, which you are with an acupuncture needle. Secondly, you don't need the levels of information as to what the energy of each point and each meridian does. Neither do you need the complex diagnostic techniques, which are using muscle testing or dowsing.
And something that Sue said, so that you don't have to have all your notes in your head, you can actually have them there, so if the technique comes up.
Yeah, have your diagrams there, with your tucked in wherever you've got your priority arcs or everything else, have your diagrams there, and if it comes up, then just flip to the one you want. If you are resistant to working with meridians, your own thinking system will blindside you out of that. But if you're open to they come up when they're appropriate,
Yes.
and don't have any, this isn't as easy as chakra stuff or subtle body stuff, then you'll find that when they do come up, they really do
So it's
hit the nail.
having faith in the straightforwardness of the technique.
Yes.
Yeah. It's just got more steps than some of the other techniques, but it's no more difficult. You don't have to think anymore, you don't have to know anymore. It's just a question of following the protocols, and remember that the meridians have got left and right sides of the body, and that there's 2 end points and things like that, so you don't miss out any of the options.
But if you've got them on your sheets of paper, you can just douse a must test. Do I need this sheet? Even if you can't remember element 0, 1, 2, just go by which sheet you need.
Okay. And you once said something about because they are closer to the physical, they're much more influenced by pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah, I mean, and also by seasons and weather. But one of the things we found early on in working as a therapist myself was that if somebody's on drugs for depression or that sort of thing, that quite often the meridian system gets a little bit scrambled, and so you will instinctively probably realise that you need to work chakras with that. But one thing I did notice, particularly as a kinesiologist, that I had to be more flexible when people were on heavy duty mind-altering pharmaceutical drugs.
But you said they're also influenced by the seasons and
Yes.
I assume lunar cycles. And
Yeah, but seasons in particular, I mean, traditional Chinese medicine, whatever, with the seasons. But yes, they are more influenced by the environment.
Yeah. And in the notes it also talks about the Chinese clock.
Yes.
What's that then?
Oh, very useful and very underused, is that during the 24 hours, every 2 hours, a particular set of meridians will become dominant, if you like, or will be switched on, switched off, however you want to think about it in your head. And this information can be very useful when listening to your client tell you about what's going on with them. Because, for example, if they say, every afternoon around about tea time or so, I suddenly feel really tired, or I wake up every morning about 5 o'clock, and then I can't get back to sleep, and as soon as the alarm's about to go off, I nod off, and then I can't wake up. What they're actually telling you is they're telling you verbally what's actually happening to the meridians, and that can give you a clue intellectually to maybe check that if it hasn't come up in any other way, that maybe some meridian work does need doing. It may just be meridian massage, but it is giving you a clue that the meridian system is actually telling you that something's not right. And so it's that the Chinese clock, as it were, is really for you to listen to your client better, and for you sometimes to ask questions. You know, somebody's saying, well, I'm sleeping very badly. The thing to do is what sort of not badly? You know, is it that they can't get to sleep? Is it that they get to sleep and then boing, they wake up and then can't get back to sleep for several hours? It actually gives you more precise information of what's actually happening energetically to them.
And sort of seeing if there's a pattern, or they can recognise a pattern.
Yes.
You know, symptoms get worse at the same time every day, and there's no obvious other reason.
I remember when some years ago I had a chronic cough situation, and 7 o'clock in the evening on the dot I would go into paroxysms of coughing, and that's my body saying that switchover triggered something, and so therefore that's giving information about actually what's oversensitising the system. So it can tell you, as for looking after yourself, it can give you some of the most important clues you'll ever get.
And then something else, which is this 5-element cycle in terms of, is it the nurturing cycle and the control cycle? So how does that help a therapist as well?
It's not really essential to know that, because there are so many variations on that cycle. There's the clockwise, the anti-clockwise, the up and down,
In and out and
In and out,
round,
way around.
Yeah.
but if you are interested in those, it can be useful because basically it follows the direction of flow
Right.
of one sort of energy or another.
Yeah.
So if you know that something is not energised and something is over-energised, you know what's going to be next to encourage the flow in the correct
Okay.
way. But I think unless you really get into that in detail, it's good to know about it, but you don't want to study it.
But I think it's also interesting because what it does give you the idea of that clockwise energy actually brings things into manifestation. Anti-clockwise energy, if you like, unpicks things. But there is some healing that you actually need to unpick things in
That's
order
the
to get
interesting part of
healing.
that idea,
That can be very interesting to realise that it's like you're not always pushing energy in. Sometimes you actually need to
Take it out.
take it out in order to free things up enough for them to re-manifest in a different form. So it's like it does bring up very interesting ideas about the process of healing.
And that's important with some disease states that are an over-energized state, as it's no good putting in more energy of any sort. What you need to do is allow energy to drain away to a more normal functioning level.
Yeah.
So the key though is still the straightforwardness of the technique, working with what's appropriate, working with muscle testing or dowsing to find out what's appropriate, and you don't need these other levels of intellectual understanding.
No, because the thing is, it's such an integrated system that if you only know a small part of it, you're likely to confuse the issues. You need to know it on lots of different levels and be flexible with that. It's like a completely different language.
But if you dowse and you muscle test, and there certainly wouldn't be techniques that I would intuit.
Yeah.
You know, you definitely need to dowse and muscle test to do that, to make sure it's appropriate.
The main thing with these two techniques as well is that they're very simple in that there's only one or two stones placed on those points, but they can have quite a turbulent effect if they are inaccurately placed or if the wrong stones are placed, because it is so precise.
Okay. So in terms of placement, you just check with the pendulum, is it
Every
does it need to be
time,
tweaked?
yeah.
And timing can
And
be very
timing
precise
can be
as well.
very precise, yeah.
And then in terms of, as you're building up your range of coloured stones for the chakras, this is also appropriate
Yeah.
for building
Yeah,
up
you see what's suited in the example session. It wasn't just that it was a pink stone, it was a particular type of pink stone.
Okay.
If you've got pink stones of the same sort, say rose quartz, and it comes up as rose quartz, and you've got 3 rose quartz, then it's as wise to check which of those
three.
rose
So
quartz.
it can be very
It can be
very
that
precise.
it can be that precise, and of course it's another a good example to have sometimes some smaller stones
Okay.
rather than some humongous ones.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter. But you will need tape.
We'll need tape.
So the difference really between the two techniques, the endpoint technique and the point along the meridian, is that an endpoint correction balances the overall flow of energy throughout that part of the system. So in a way it's a sort of chakra type correction in that it's a general thing and much more precise than a chakra correction. The point or points along a meridian is balancing a particular point issue. So that's more likely to create interesting after effects in how the person behaves, reacts, or whatever. So you do have to be aware and to say this may not have felt very strong or anything going on while it was going on, but it's likely to create quite a lot of positive change.
Yeah, and dreams and things like that you wouldn't expect.
It's very much more likely to be one particular stress issue in their life. You know, one event, one stressor. So you're releasing that one stressor.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's okay.
I remember once I had an acupuncture